Avatar: The Last Airbender is one of my favorite shows ever made. It's right up there with Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, and that is a high praise. It has such deep and multifaceted characters that feel authentic, but are still able to be goofy when they need to. It kept you guessing on what was to come, and you could always count on at least one sequence of Sakuga from each episode. Everyone I knew growing up watched this show religiously. It didn't matter if you were a football player, a game nerd, or a dude bro. Everyone could get together and talk about how badass this television show was. And that's pretty special, honestly. Not many shows, let alone a cartoon, had that kind of magnetism for multiple audiences. And recently the show was given a boxed Blu-ray release, and I jumped on that thing as fast as I could. Now I'm just waiting for my Fresh Prince of Bel-Air Blu-ray box. That is, if all these plastic guards don't stop coming off. Ugh. Within a week or two of watching all 3 seasons, I was able to see again why this show is so incredible. But I want more Avatar love.
You amuse me. I will make you mine.
You mean like a boyfriend or like a slave?
Yes.
Booby time!
No. Just no. Back when the Nintendo DS was all that my siblings and I played, I remember getting the first Avatar game for it and enjoying it very much so. So yeah, I think that's what I'll do. I'll play all 3 console releases of the Avatar games and see how faithfully they adapt the main story of the show. I don't know much about anything from these games, and I can't really recall much about the DS game, so this will be a journey for sure. If you haven't seen the original show yet, then I cannot recommend it enough. These 3 games will be slightly harder to appreciate and follow if you're unfamiliar with the Avatar story, so proceed at your own risk. But let's get going. Avatar: The Last Airbender for the Nintendo GameCube is a little strange. For starters, you don't start off in the South Pole and get to know Sokka and Katara as Aang, or anything like that. You start off in the North Pole. The goal is still to learn waterbending, but with none of the family drama of the original show, for the beginning or the end. This game takes several big liberties with its story. It's pretty much in its own separate timeline. I mean, the place gets invaded, but by Zuko instead of Zhao. He's nowhere to be seen, along with Uncle Iroh. Katara gets kidnapped and then Sokka and Aang eventually rescue her, but she claims she also wants to free this lady, Leon the Maker, who escapes before we can rescue her. So then the gang just kinda meanders about, meeting people and helping them with their inconsequential problems. Even finding Haru's village later on and recruiting him, but for no real reason. The big threat are these machines that are sprouting up all over the place, terrorizing innocent towns and even the Fire Nation. But the Fire Nation themselves aren't even really that big of a threat in this game. And the goal of getting rid of the machines only shows up when the gang finds out that Leon was the one behind the machines. We finally track her down, and she says that her machines are necessary to stop the Fire Lord and has no faith in the Avatar to learn all the elements by summer's end. She wants to use the machines to destroy the Fire Lord and asks Aang to help her. He refuses because she's already hurt people in the process. Like, why would you not just join her so you can monitor her? Stupid kid. It sounds like a cool premise, but it's written really sloppily, so it kinda loses its bearings pretty quickly. They finally track Leon down and she has her big machine ready, but this model requires benders to operate. Even though she says in the same room as these guys,
"What I'm doing is putting thinkers in charge of the world instead of magicians."
Yeah, and wait, is that a Fire Nation soldier? She's trying to kill the Fire Lord after all, right? Does that mean this guy's defective? Who cares? She has them on the ropes, but seeing all of his friends hurt so quickly shoves Aang into the Avatar state, allowing him to be victorious. The machine falls over and supposedly kills Leon, but the group are quickly back in the air and on to their next adventure. The story is basic stuff, but it makes me wonder why they chose to use an original story with a continuity rewrite and then kill the main threat immediately. They could have made Leon into a big Fire Lord-esque threat, because we see Zuko a total of 3 times in this game, and he's never a problem for the group. He even gets captured by Leon, and it's honestly the funniest scene in the game when the team tries to rescue him.
No!
It's so funny. This game is obviously trying to be a game for kids, so it's forgivable, if a bit confusing given the plot's darker themes of prejudice and death. However, I can't look past how everyone in this game is an absolute idiot. In the beginning, Katara gets caught in a bear hug by one dude, and the Avatar and a master waterbender just stand there and say this.
Oh no!
Dumb. This is dumb. Then when Sokka and Aang are sneaking in the Fire Nation base and have disguises, Aang doesn't cover up his arrow, and the gods don't even notice. What? Like, then they fly to this air temple because Leon told Aang that she's going to sever his ties to the Avatar spirit. But he literally calls her bullshit on it because there's no way she could do that.
And that's supposed to break your connection to the Avatar spirits?
It can't! They're just statues! But I can't let her destroy them! Idiots!
Blah blah blah. So what does he do? He walks right into her trap. Okay, maybe it's not everyone, maybe it's just Aang. Yeah, Aang is terrible in this game. The presentation is a big, horrendous contributing factor too. The show has such a solid look, and I'm sure the design team did the best they could do, but the animations and character models look so strange. The way these models emote are so off and unnatural looking, and the draw distance on their features is pathetic. Their faces become unidentifiable very quickly at a distance, and it just looks bizarre. Oh, and you remember how the show had like incredible sound design, like everything sounded great? Let me show you the first scene of the game.
Katara said she would go penguin sledding with me before training today. See you later, boy!
Yeah, it's bad. These lazy stock sound effects are everywhere in the game, and the bending looks really weird too. I understand why though. Early hardware and all that stuff, but I can't help but feel like there were better alternatives. Unexpectedly though, the entire original voice cast reprises their roles. So, the things that they say might be stupid.
Hey, who's touching my boomerang?
Yeah, like that. But at least it's authentic. And on the topic of unexpected, this game is a dungeon crawling RPG. Personally, I expected this kind of universe to be more suited towards a character action game or a platformer. But to be fair, combat is real time, so you have to put forth some effort if you want to be successful in the encounters. Your eventual party will be comprised of Aang, Sokka, Katara, and Haru. Everyone has a basic combo, an unnecessary block, and special moves that can be activated by holding the right trigger and selecting the corresponding face button. The RPG elements mean that enemies reward you with experience points and other goodies for defeating them. This also means you'll be running into enemies at every possible turn. Oh, I love the episode where the gang has to talk with King Boomy, but has to defeat packs of bandits in Ba Sing Se. Oh, I love the episode where they just start fighting a pack of
Eggman's robots!
I think the game expects every character to have their own advantages and disadvantages in combat, but the only two who do have real differences are Haru and Katara. Katara is your dedicated healer for this adventure, but isn't outstanding as far as damage goes. And Haru is good at keeping enemies at a distance, even if it's not a very useful prospect to build a character around in this game. More on that in a second. Which leaves Aang and Sokka, the two that I enjoyed playing as the most. They just had a bunch of big damaging attacks. They were the best at getting in enemies' faces, and that's what I want to do, so they were my go-to. Mostly Sokka until you get Aang's late game special moves, which make short work of like everything. Since the party's gained experience is given to every character, no one is ever under-leveled or under-prepared. Katara always had healing spells that could cheaply heal the entire party, Sokka and Aang had the offense covered, especially by late game, and Haru, he had some rocks. Yep. But this brings up one of my larger problems with this game's overall structure as an RPG. The reason I like action games so much is because typically, the only reason I get to progress in the game is because I was better than the challenge it presented. It's that simple. It was engaging enough for me to want to learn, yes, but I got better because I was able to win. No other reason. But games like this like to streamline your progress with numbers. In this game, your party has stats determining your health, how much damage you do, how much damage you take, how much mana you can spend, how much mana you have, and then you have to take into account 9 different item slots for each character individually and who should be given what for their hidden stat preferences. It's exhausting and I don't care. RPGs are a type of game that I'm very glad exists, but we don't need the number games they bring in every other game. When you stick a number behind something like your basic attack, it's very easy for players to find ways to easily abuse this. I remember making a glass cannon character in the first Xenoverse game and making Nick and Elliot mad when I fought them because it wasn't fair how busted my basic punches were. It's not exactly the same here, but it's similar to how easy it is to make Aang's special moves busted in this game. And it's all because of how simple it is to gain big XP rewards for simple fetch side quests and taking out high-level squads of enemies in a few seconds. And then it just becomes a domino effect at that point when you focus on the attacks that are best. So, when enemy encounters of all kinds logically come down to a choice of do I use Aang's whirlwind or do I sneak past them? You should always choose one of those because the other choices take much longer and give you the same rewards as Aang's whirlwind. And as I was saying before, Haru is based on keeping enemies at a distance. Why would you need range on your side if you have the strength and defense to quickly and efficiently get through with the encounter? You wouldn't. And if I'm being realistic, I'm sure the reason this game can be so easily exploited and broken in half is because it's made for children. But I don't think that kids are too keen on RPGs and managing equipment in the first place, so I don't understand why this was added. Kids would much rather have something that's easy to comprehend and simple to understand, not this large, confusing mess of a game. There are also lots of little inconsistencies and pace breakers too. Like there will sometimes be certain context-sensitive focus opportunities to progress or maybe get some extra treasure, but these are character-specific and the game doesn't tell you specifically what character to use. So, you could be exploring or trying to complete one of the many side quests and come across a focus action. If you aren't playing with the right character, your character has to make a quip and then you have to try again with your next guess. But there's a few second delay on when you can swap back to another character. So you could potentially waste a ridiculous amount of time just waiting for some crappy randomized loot when the game could just let you do the tag action since they're all in your party. It's not like there's ever a point when Aang can do a waterbending thing instead of Katara, or Haru can throw a rock instead of Sokka throwing his boomerang. They're all character specific. So I have no idea why they thought it was a good idea to make me wait like that when they could just activate it anyway. The equipment, the stats, and all the other stuff might work in games like Diablo and other dungeon crawlers, but I don't think the target audience of this game cares about that kind of stuff. Yeah, so I think this game just tries to go in too many experimental directions while not thinking a lot of the simple important stuff, and it kind of dropped the ball, so I'd skip this one if dungeon crawlers aren't your thing. On to the next one. The next game, Burning Earth, centers on the second season of the show. And I say centers because it would be a rock to the face to say this game follows the brilliant second season of Avatar. Let's jump from there in fact, because this was one of the most distracting things playing through this game. The story of Burning Earth supposedly starts right where the last game ends. It even references Leon in the opening cutscene, stating she was one of the great threats they've overcome thus far in their journey, going out of its way to connect these games. But unfortunately, this game drops the completely original elements of the story. There are original pieces, yes, but they come from, let's say, remixing the show's story. For those who are disappointed by the lack of more dedicated retellings of the show, rejoice, kind of. Haru is no longer in the group, Aang is now a waterbender at this point, and we can come into contact with most of the characters you would expect. However, things are very out of place. I would be here for hours if I tried to explain to you every little thing that's out of place to someone who has watched this show front to back several times. But the main problem here is that it's so dedicated to telling you the complete cover-to-cover story, but without giving you any information on the pages in between those covers. and while making up ludicrous band-aid solutions when its points obviously don't connect in meaningful ways. Like, let's take Jet as an example. In Book 1, the gang meets Jet and his gang, who are freedom fighters who harass the Fire Nation. But later on you find out Jet is manipulative and a monster and no one trusts him anymore after he tries to kill innocent people. In the next season he has a meaningful redemption arc and does what he can do to help stop something clearly bigger than he was. There are a lot of moving parts and only veterans of the show will understand. So here we go. You run into Jet in the swamp episode here. In the same episode that Appa is trying not to get eaten, he's just hanging out and runs into the gang. Then, later on, we find him in Ba Sing Se, where he's giving the now relevant Zuko and Uncle the evil eyes. Even though the game never showed us the scene where Jet saw Iroh heat his tea, thus having no room for suspicion in the game's continuity. Then it's dropped and he never interacts with them again. Except, they still make it seem like Jet has been to Lake Laogai before, even though he didn't have a conflict with Zuko, therefore did not have a reason to be arrested and taken to Lake Laogai and rid of his Fire Nation hysteria.
It's time for you to stop doing this!
And like I said, beyond that, there are many more inconsistencies to take into account. They let the audience in on Long Fang's secret immediately. The final confrontation is on the drill instead of in the Dai Li headquarters. Katara pleads with Zuko even though they never got to have their little moment in the Crystal Cave, and many others. In addition to the mistakes that have to do with the game not having enough resources to tell the story properly. Like when everyone's having visions in the swamp, not only does Aang have a vision about the drill for some reason, but he also has a vision of Toph like normal, but he says the line from the show verbatim.
In my vision, I saw a girl in a white dress with the pet flying bull.
No you didn't. She's never modeled in a white dress, so she's just seen in her normal adventuring outfit. And when they're trying to convince the Fire Nation guards that they have Pentapox so they can escape, Aang's arrow is uncovered again, but no one seems to care or realize or anything. Did they even watch the show? When Toph and Aang decide to run around and train in the desert, how can Toph jump around and see these platforms of sand? Or in the drill? I thought she preferred to stay on the ground where she can see. The game just doesn't have the patience to tell you the story in its original form, and it doesn't seem to be interested in telling you in an original form, so it comes across as a mess. And the game's overall presentation does not do much to tidy up the mess either. With the constant frame rate drops, stiff idle animations for dialogue exchanges, and simple lighting and world construction being very distracting. Thankfully, playing the game doesn't come across as so much of a mess, but something that's just sort of there. So when I said that I wanted the first game to be a character action or a platformer kind of game, I did not mean like this, man. If you've ever played any other licensed movie game like Shrek 2 or Kung Fu Panda, you know exactly what this game is. You have two characters you play as in each level. They can all do the same exact things but with a different coat of paint pretty much. Everyone has a basic combo that can be broken up with different effects by splicing in the B button into presses. Once you fought the first fight, you fought the last fight because nothing ever changes. Oh, your scenery and the characters might, but they all require the same tactic of just mash the attack buttons mindlessly until you win. It got so boring so fast. I clocked almost 10 hours in to beat the first game, but it only took me 4 hours to beat this one. But it took me more days to actually force myself to sit down and complete Burning Earth than the first. There are some interesting things to do here, like little basic puzzles and collectibles, but it means nothing in the grand scheme of things. It's nice that Aang can do waterbending and earthbending tasks now, but it's so boring to have to fight in the same fights over and over. At least in the other game I could cheese the fights and get out of them if I wanted, but here I have to endure pressing the X and B buttons until everyone is down. And with the bosses, it's so much worse. They all have an annoying amount of invincibility frames, so it's a total guessing game to when you're going to actually start chopping down their health again. That, and when you see the same exact ending QTE cutscene for every fight, it all leads to them feeling very samey, and yes, very boring. You can speed the smaller bad guys' fights up with these little cheat tokens that give you unique special moves, seemingly from the previous game. Aang gets his little whirlwind, and Sokka gets this buff move that I failed to mention, but was awesome for damage, but it sucks here. and everyone else kind of just gets an AoE attack that does a lot of damage. Even Momo is a playable character here, and it was one of my favorite things about the game. In fact, that's the best thing about this game. Seeing how the last game only gave me 3 characters that I cared to play as, this game lets me play as a bunch of characters that all, yes, may very well be the same, but I still appreciate the fan service. Playing as Momo, Zuko, and Iroh? That's really, really neat. And even Jet was a cool surprise, even if you were a dumb part of the story overall, isn't that right, buddy?
Wow!
I have no doubt that this game would have been a favorite of mine and my brother's if we had had it growing up. Even if it was a bug-riddled, boring game, I think a pair of siblings would actually be able to find some serious enjoyment out of this one. There's even a versus mode where people can duke it out to find out who's better between, dream matchups like Momo versus Zuko. God, man. This feature was actually in the story mode for one part when Toph is teaching Aang to earthbend, and could have been in other places so easily and made the co-op aspect so much more engaging for... Whatever. Let's just move on. Okay, Jet?
Wow!
Going into this final chapter, I was honestly expecting the worst of the worst. For starters, this game is exclusively on the Wii, DS, and PS2, oddly enough. I was taken by surprise when tracking the games down to find that the second game in the series was the only HD game in the lineup. If it's worth anything, aside from the anticipated frame dips here and there, I think this is the best looking game in the trilogy. The animations are nicely done in and out of the cutscenes, the models look much better, and the characters' outfits change when appropriate. I think this is the most faithful adaptation attempted. It still doesn't look spectacular, but it's leaps and bounds better than... and of course better than... But I wish I could praise the attempt at storytelling here. Well, it's definitely not original, and it's certainly no continuation. After the last game completely omitted my favorite moment of the show, the beginning of this one just teleports us back on track with the beginning of the show's 3rd season. Aang is presumed dead, which they don't do anything with, and we're heading for the Fire Nation with the rebellion. It picks a few episodes from Book 3 and lets you run through them with changes to accommodate the medium. Like you go to the Lake Village and waterbend in front of everyone, talk to Roku at the Air Temple, Zuko saves you from Azula on the Day of Black Sun, and Katara defeats the Fire Lord, just like in the show. So there's no reason to praise the accuracy of it anymore, so let's please move on. Being on the Wii, you can actually manipulate and move the elements around, whether that's for a variety of puzzles or combat that is at the same time incredibly refreshing and also expectedly clunky. Let's begin with the puzzles though. Seeing as how this game does have a greater focus on actually controlling the elements, a bigger attempt at testing the player's observational skills was expected. Depending on the character, you can utilize elements present in each level. Katara can freeze and cut things, Toph can throw rocks, Sokka has boomerang, and Zuko can move fire to activate switches, even though he can literally make fire, but it's to be expected at this point. Aang can of course use all the elements, including creating a burst of air by circling the cursor. I really do like how all these maneuvers are activated. To make pillars of ice or rock, you have to raise the remote in the air. To freeze water, you have to pick up the water and then wave the nunchuck. These all feel really intuitive and good to pull off. And if you watched our motion control video, I think this would definitely fall under the category of games that are really giving the motion controls an actual shot. So it's admirable and very much appreciated for a fan of this universe. Some of these puzzles actually do a good job of building off of things that were automated in the other games and giving you the most amount of freedom possible. It's an appropriate evolution of what seems like trust in the player from the developers. That might be wishful thinking on my part, but I'm going to stay optimistic seeing as how all these games were made by THQ Australia and Halfbrick in the span of 2 years. But then that opens me up to more frustration when the game can be vague or downright incompetent on effectively conveying what the solution of these puzzles are. There can be times when the only means of progression is from using common sense due to poor player direction. Like here with Zuko and Aang. I use ice platforms to get up the waterfall, but then am unsure of how to break this wooden plank of wood. Conventional game knowledge would tell me that I jump up and slam down on the flimsy boards, but that's incorrect. What you actually have to do is go back down the waterfall, find a torch on the wall, firebend the fire, slowly walk it over, and blindly noodle it up around the top until I heard a noise. I climbed back up and the path was cleared. This is dumb. It would have been all forgiven had the camera just pulled back to show me the top of the waterfall, but instead it had me blindly solve the problem with no proper direction to do so. This is just one of the isolated examples, but poor conveyance plagues this game, which is a shame because it has some legitimately neat ideas that were fun to figure out, but is so bogged down as a whole because of these annoying instances. But inversely, on the topic of combat, I'm rather glad to see that you aren't told how to specifically do anything. I think the second game faltered because of that constant hand-holding and the oversimplification of your abilities. But this game falters in spite of its most interesting mechanic, unfortunately. Just like last time, every character has basic attack button, but this time it's even more simplified. You have just a 2-hit combo that'll automatically do a finisher when the enemy is weak enough to be finished off. And you also have an aerial projectile and an aerial AoE slam to give yourself some breathing room. And the spotlight is obviously on the free bending mechanic in this game. You can create a single blast of air as Aang, or you can swirl around a stream of water, a small rock, or a ball of fire to do damage if you have the right character. Your physical attacks can often be blocked very easily and are typically weak, but bending is unblockable and your strongest method of attack. Too bad it's also the clunkiest. Your movement speed is drastically cut when free bending, so if you can't quickly hit the target that's closing in on you, you're going to be taking damage. And the gang are the weakest they've ever been. A few hits and you're dead. This is very punishing, seeing as how the potions and healing items from the last 2 games are relegated to very limited enemy drops. This led me to be a little cheap with some lengthier boss fights at the end of the lengthier levels, because if you do die, you'll have to play a significant chunk of the level over again due to the use of very limited checkpoint systems. The game is again incentivized to be a co-op experience, but this almost seems like compensation rather than functionality. I frequently found myself swapping characters to conserve health, because it works on Halo 2 Legendary rules. If one of you goes down, it's game over. It's really punishing trial and error gameplay at times, but I think I know why. I beat this game in 3 hours. It is easily the shortest game in the trilogy, and I have to wonder if development was rushed, or the faith in the project just wasn't high after the poor reception of the last 2 games. It's just noticeably lacking in content. I mean, to have the Avatar state featured so much in the last game, it's entirely absent in this title. Not even a mention. Some boss fights legitimately have cool concepts and mechanics, but never really get time to be fleshed out. After a normal 3-hour playthrough of this game, it said I was 90% done with everything it had to offer, which is honestly sad. Because, like I said, this game seemed like it was finally adopting its own style as far as combat goes. But I know the Legend of Korra games basically rip off the Arkham series after this, so it's a little sad to see it shelved after an attempt that probably didn't get everyone's full focus. This little look back sure was something, man. I never expected so many different attempts to find a footing for a concept that lent itself so easily to action. Who knows? If you haven't got the chance to sit down with this show yet, or for some reason watch this video after all my warnings, please go find some way to watch it. It's more than worth your time. And as far as the games go, it honestly just depends on what you like and if you're interested at all. If you want something that can be easily exploited and laughed at for just how much of a departure from the source material it is, play the first one. If you want a fun little co-op game to play with your siblings, play the third one. And if you have to have your games in HD and don't really care for deep combat, production values, or a coherent plot, play Spider-Man 1 the movie game. Thank you so much for watching through my little look into the Avatar games. If you'd like to see more retrospective type videos like this, be sure to let me know in the comments, and what you'd like to see me cover. And for those of you who are active watchers of this channel, and are invested in the videos and stuff like that, I greatly appreciate it. But coming towards the end of October, there might be a bit of a hiatus for videos. I'm having to go in for another open heart surgery, so it might be a little while before another video gets made. It's nothing really, I just probably will need some time to recover. I plan on looking at Call of Duty Modern Warfare, hopefully by time I have to go in for the operation. But anyway, I appreciate you for watching. So thanks for stopping by, and have a great day.
Oh, don't let the cave-in get you down. Don't let the falling rocks turn your smile into a frown. When the tunnel's as dark as that's when you need a clown. Hey! Don't let the cave-in get you down, Sokka. Even if you're lost, you can't lose the love because